All right, hello everybody. This is the Schoology Assessments pop-up PD. This may be your third, second, or your first pop-up PD. We're going to cover all about Schoology Assessments, the different question types, all about that kind of stuff and the ways you can assess your students with some of the different interactive question types. I'm joined by Dylan and Heather on the rotary Skype phone. She's having some internet issues, so you cannot see her face, but she is joining us supposedly.
Not supposedly, I'm right here listening with bated breath.
If you haven't watched any of the others, they are set up the exact same way, where we're going to have a slide just as kind of like an agenda to go by. Then we'll have the recording, which you're clearly watching, and there will be a task that will be associated with that. So we're going to try and keep this to about 30 minutes, so that way you have the other half of the time to kind of get started and get working. So what we're going to do is we're just going to briefly talk about what Schoology assessments are. When you are on Schoology, you're going to see there's also an option for test quiz. So what's the difference? And why are there two? Why would you use one versus the other? So we'll get into that a little bit and the difference in some of their settings, the different types of questioning. So there are some basic questions that you've used in Google Forms and some other things, like true, false, multiple choice. And then these advanced questions are more interactive that we're going to get into, where kids can actually interact with some of the material, record themselves, things like that. And they would be able to be graded on certain areas for that, which is really nice. One of the big things too is just setting it up. So aside from adding your questions, there's a lot of things that you can do, such as giving kids the chance to retake it, giving them a time limit, giving them accessibility of having a calculator or a notepad, things like that. You can turn it all on and off. So we'll get into that a little bit. The last one under that one is preview, which is huge because you can set up your entire assessment and then you can quickly preview it to see what it looks like from the student's perspective, which is really nice. As well as enabling and disabling submissions, which we talk about. And I believe in one of the other pop-up PDs are the initial 3 hours, that not only in assessments, but in other things like discussions and things like that, you can enable them and disable them. And there's one specific with assessments: if you disable it or unpublish it, it will temporarily remove it from your gradebook. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And then the big one is obviously you want most of these to be graded for you. So there's some that you would not be able to have graded, such as like a paragraph answer, short answer, some things like that you may have to listen to. So for all the other ones, you want to make sure that you are setting up an answer key so that it is automatically graded. And then the last one I have bolded is working together and working smarter. And what I mean by that is, if you're working together in a group with your department or other teachers, co-teachers, things like that, is you can create these together, and then you have that master copy of the assessment that you've built together, and then you can push it to each of your own classes. And the nice thing is those student responses from your own classes will not carry to another teacher. So it's basically they're taking a copy. So it's a great way to kind of divvy up the share, and you'd be able to have multiple assessments. So that's kind of the overview. I know I went through that fast, but obviously this is going to stay here. And all of these things that are underlined are all linked to the Schoology Help Center, which has a lot of great resources. So we wanted to have those there for you, and a lot of them go step by step. Some of them I will come back and forth and open, but like this first one says, what are Schoology assessments? They have a really fantastic guide all about Schoology assessments. These are all clickable. There's some GIF images, and then they have some even deeper ones specific to what you're looking for. So before we kind of get started and jump into that, I'm going to see if they have any questions or if they want to add anything.
I have a question, Brian. So how, in your experience, how do assessments in Schoology compare to Google Forms? I know a lot of teachers have started using Google Forms, given we're all doing this remote teaching. And, how do they compare, just briefly?
Yeah, I personally am not a huge fan of the Google Forms, just because I come from an environment using this, so it's difficult for me. I find Google Forms are really easy for surveys and for the multiple choice drop downs, things like that. But for quiz purposes, I know sometimes it can be difficult to kind of make a question, have it a certain way, and kind of have to do a workaround for it. So I'm not a huge fan of it for quiz purposes. It's great for surveys and things like that. This makes it a lot more engaging rather than just having your true false. you're having kids highlight an image, you're having them drag things to label things. So I like that there's those interactive type questions that you can't really have with Google Forms.
Mm-hmm. Can you, I know I've had many secondary teachers ask me this in terms of locking kids in Google Forms. Is that possible in Schoology Assessments?
It does not have its own built-in lock thing like that. They had something called Respondus Lockdown Browser, if you've ever heard of that. That's a separate product. And again, one thing I want to stress is that even though we're going over Schoology Assessments, all of those things you've created in Google Forms can still be done by just going to add materials, add a link, and you can still give those. And I expect a lot of people will continue to do that. But as they see and what we're going to go through some of these questions, I think they're going to see like, wow, like this is really cool. There's a lot of neat interactive questions. But just knowing that those things that they've created in the past in Google Forms is not necessarily gone. So if you want that locked feature, you can still use those.
Okay, great. Thanks.
All right. So one of the things, and we have these in all of our other pop-up PDs, but I just have a test course that I, try things out, see how they look. So this is a test course, and it's a mess. But the second one here I have is called Assessment Example. So when I would go to add materials, you'll notice the two here. They're two green puzzle pieces. One is like a lime green and says test quiz. The other one is I guess you'd call it like a light green, mint green, add assessment. The difference between test and quiz is about 2 or 3 years ago, assessments never existed. It was simply just test and quiz. And those were your very similar to Google Forms and your, fill in the blank, multiple choice, true, false, those kinds of questions. And what they did was then a lot of people and teachers who were Schoology users were asking for those more enhanced, interactive type questions. And that's what they did creating assessments. So once assessments was created, they still left test and quiz there because people had a lot of these created. So what they are going to do eventually is test and quiz under add materials will eventually be removed. So as we are a district that is now starting, I would recommend avoiding test and quiz if you can. You'll see when we go through these questions, there's a lot more interactive things. So I would try to avoid this. However, you have the ability right now to create it. Just know that whenever this gets removed, and at this point we don't know, they've been saying that for about 1.5 years now. But once that's removed, your test and quizzes that you've created then will be gone. So going back to this agenda, there's a spot here. It says how to convert an already created test quiz to an assessment. So I'm going to show that real quick. So I already have one that's created. It was called sample. So what I do when I click this little gearbox, I see my typical same options that I've seen before, where it says edit, unpublish, delete, save to resources, things like that. In order to convert it, and this is why we say best practice is to create it inside of your resources, because I've already saved it to my resources because that's where I've built it. So when I go to my resources, I'm going to see that same sample test quiz under my home resources here. And you'll notice when I click on the right-hand side, that same gearbox, you see I have some different options. This one right here says convert to assessment. And again, I'm encouraging you to use the assessments, not the test quiz. However, if you do that, when you would click on convert to assessment, I could say, home, no folder, convert. And it's going to take a little bit, so you'll see it pop up in a little bit. I'll come back to it. But what it would do is it would say sample, and then underneath it would have this lime green or mint green puzzle piece. Now it has turned it into an assessment. So that's kind of the big difference. So again, I would just kind of encourage you at this point to just start with assessments, because this test and quiz eventually is going to go away. But I just wanted to kind of mention that. And the reason they haven't really gotten rid of test and quiz yet is there's just some features and some settings and things like that that they have not yet added to the assessments that people did not want to lose. So before I go into kind of setting it up and then showing you the different types of questions, do you guys have anything you want to say or add?
Nope, not at this time.
Nope, I'm good, Brian.
All right. So all I did is when you go to add materials and add assessment, it's going to look like this screen right here once it loads. just giving it a name. Again, we encourage you anytime you're giving an assessment, an activity, things like that, make sure you add a due date because it will automatically show up for the students in the calendar. One things I wanted to point out right here, and I'm going to talk about this later, but from this main screen is right now submissions are disabled. So students in the course would see that there's an assessment present. However, when they click on it, it would say for them, this assessment is currently not accepting submissions. Same with a password. You could enable and set a password for that assessment if you wanted to. And then the rest right now, it's just ungraded. You know, next year when we come back in August, we'll talk about gradebook setup and, you know, categories matching to PowerSchool, things like that. But for right now, we're just going to ignore that. And then again, right here, I can individually assign this, which we talk about in some other pop-ups. But again, this is really nice for makeups, adapted tests, things like that. You can individually assign them to a student, specifically, you know, a group, individual, but the others will not see it at all, which is really nice. And then the second one, this says publish to students. This means that right now, I said if a student went in here, it would be published. If I uncheck that, it would show up in my course, but no student would be able to see it. So if I hit, you know, save changes, you would see that it is unpublished. So the difference between that is published means a student can see it, but as long as the submissions are disabled, they are not able to take it. They can just see that the test or the assessment is there. So those are the ones that I wanted to kind of point out. And then once you would hit create, obviously it's going to show up, and then I can click inside of it and it will take me to the main screen to where I can get started working with the assessments. And you can see right now it says submissions are disabled. So across the top.
So I
ahead.
really like that. I was just going to say, I really think that is great because you could publish the assessment to indicate to students that the assessment is coming, but keep it locked until the day of. So, I mean, I think that's great.
No, and that's the nice thing. And, you know, if you would unpublish it and the kids have already taken it, it's one of those things that it's just a nuance that it would, you know, kind of not manipulate the grade, but it would kind of hide it in the grade book as well. So it's always important to kind of be careful of unpublishing it and rather keeping it published and just leaving as submissions, because also if you unpublish it, it's going to take the due date and thing off of the calendar. It will also kind of take that away. So you just want to be careful.
Yeah. I guess that's what I like, that if you publish it, the due date is going to be there so that the kids know absolutely when the assessment is coming. Parents will know that because they'll eventually be connected. But yet, you know, they can't do it yet or see the questions yet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is it possible to schedule it to accept submissions? Is that, or do you have to manually do it the day of?
You have to manually add on the submissions.
Okay.
So across the top, so now that I'm clicked in it again, I'm going to switch back and forth between the teacher view and the student view. But just a couple of things I wanted to point out is this assessment example. I have every single one of these questions as a sample. And we're going to quickly go through some of them. I'm not going to go through all of them just because, you know, there's almost 20 of them. But what I wanted to point out, so I was talking about test and quiz before. Test and quiz only offers, I think it's multiple choice, true, false, matching, ordering, fill in the blank, and short answer. The rest are only available in this assessment. So there you can see there are so much more different options. So at the top here from the teacher's perspective is you always want to start with setup, and then you obviously are going on to your questions. So setup's going to give you all of your settings and things like that. And then you get to go start adding different questions. So from the setup, this is their instructions I would display to the students. And just like we showed before and Dylan mentioned in his Pages pop-up PD, all of these options are still pretty much the same. When I get down to the settings, I can choose on and really tailor if I want to have the assessment have a time limit. Do I want the questions to be randomly ordered? So Dylan's question number 1 may be my question number 8. So that's an option as well. And then showing possible points. One of my favorite things is giving the kids some different accessibility. So what they call the assessment toolbar is you're really giving kids options to have some things to kind of help them along depending on what type of test you're giving. And what I mean by that is they can flag questions for review. And I'm going to show you these as we go through it. They can eliminate answer choices. They can use a calculator. So as the teacher, I can choose yes, they can have a scientific, yes, a basic, or no. Same with a ruler. I can do centimeters or inches. They can use a protractor, highlight text, and use a notepad. So there's a lot of different things, and I have them all selected as yes. So you're going to be able to see what they look like, and Heather's just going to have to envision it in her head because she can't see my screen.
Okay, well, here's what I'm envisioning in my head right now. Can you individually assign those different aspects?
I don't think so.
Okay, so if you're going to turn on the calculator, it's turned on for everybody versus, you know, just kids who perhaps need that accommodation.
I believe so, but I don't want to say 100% because that'd be a great feature, but I don't believe so.
Okay.
And then one thing I wanted to point out here, just to really stress, it may seem simple, but allowing students to view the results after an attempt is submitted, that's a simple yes, no, or yes with correct answers. So the yes just allows them to see that they have submitted it. But the number of attempts is very, very important. And what I mean by that is if you've watched, you know, student completion pop-up PD, or let's say a student loses internet in between, if right now
I can relate to that.
if their number of attempts is set to 1, when they go to try and take it again, they're not going to be able to. So I'm not saying to go all the way down to 20 times, but just be aware that if a student, you know, let's say you're in class and the internet goes out or something like that, you're going to have to delete their initial test submissions or wherever they left off, because it's going to act from Schoology's end like they've already taken it.
Yeah, that's a totally good thing to think about if we're still in the remote environment.
Correct. So you're almost, I always say you're almost better off giving yourself a little room for error. So maybe 2 or 3 times. And so if I set this to 3 times, you're going to say, well, isn't that going to adjust their score? You can just say their last score, their highest score, or what you can say is, and you can see from the teacher's end, if they took it 3 times, they don't want to take it 3 times, but what that will allow you to do is not have to get an email from that student saying they can't get back in. So you'll be able to see on the teacher's end how many times they've taken it, how long it took them, and all their correct and incorrect answers. So let me jump over to, before I go to the questions, I'm going to click on preview. And what this does, actually, let me go back real quick, is all of these questions I have created. So you can see I have 1 through 19. I have 1 for each of these. And I'm just going to go through a couple of them. But the nice thing about this is as you're creating it, sometimes it's difficult to, you know, if I click on this one, well, what does it look like? I see it from the teacher's side. I want a picture to display this way, or I want the answers to display this way. So I want to see what it looks like from the student's end. So the nice thing about that is going to preview, and you can see this, the preview, your answers will not be saved or shown to students. And then this is where my instructions were. You can see I have my grade and I have my 1 attempt. So this is exactly what it would look like for the kids. So I'm going to hit start a new attempt. And before I get started, I just want to just show some of those accessibility things I was talking about. So if I had all of those off, they would not be here. All those ones that I mentioned, like the ruler, the protractor, eliminating answer choices, they all show here. And a kid can turn those on or off at any point. So what that means is, I'll skip the review one because let me answer a few questions first. But the accessibility, I can choose my color scheme. So if I'm a student and I want white on black, I can do that. And you might recognize this when you use, you know, immersive reader, things like that inside of Pear Deck. Schoology now has this inside their assessments. I can change font size. So when you think of kids with IEPs and 504s, giving them the ability to change this on their own, in my eyes, is great because it's allowing them to kind of customize it with what's going to work for them.
Yeah, you know what, Brian? I love giving all kids those features just because I mean, what a great way to give them a little bit of control and a little bit of choice. I know myself that's how I do all my reading now. If I couldn't make the font big and pick my own colors, my gosh, I'd never read as much.
Mm-hmm. The third one down is a flag. So let's say I'm a student. I'm having a lot of trouble with this first one. I can click this flag. And when I go back up, the reason I said I wanted to wait is I'm going to hit review. You can see as a kid, I have that one flag. So now envision if they flagged out of these 19, 5 of them, and actually let me do it to one more. I'll do it to number 3. I'm going to flag this one. So when I go to review, they have 2 flagged. What they can do is hit the checkbox that says flagged, and it will filter all their flagged ones so they can go back and answer those. Same with unattempted. If there's one they go to submit and they forgot one, it will show them that they have one that was unattempted, which is really nice to be able to do that. Let me go back to number 1. The next one was the limited answer choices. I think this is a really cool one, especially for like multiple choice, things like that, is when they click on this, I have a basic question of what color is the sky? Well, I know it's not yellow, so I'm going to click that. And you can see it grays it out. So it really helps a kid visually to kind of cross off those answers and eliminate those choices, which is really cool. The next one, and actually the last couple, are all math related. So here's a calculator. A student can turn it on and turn it off. There's a ruler. And what I like too is these are interactive. So if you have a picture, they can kind of move these. So I've seen teachers where they have students, do things with the protractor to kind of measure the angles and things like that. So again, these are all here. The last one is the notepad. They can take notes. When they go to another question, that notepad stays and follows, which is pretty neat. So all of these you can turn on or turn off, but the ability of the student is to kind of turn it on and turn it off, or use it or not whenever they want to. So those
Brian,
go ahead.
Is that notepad only available in assessment, or like, let's say the teacher builds a page and the student, can they open the notepad to take notes on and then have them there for the assessment, or no?
That I've only ever seen in assessments.
Okay.
So some of these I'm going to go through, and again, I'm not going to go through all of them because it'll take us a while. But you can see here's multiple choice. This one is true, false. This one is matching. So you have your terms. Think of it like terms and definitions. So what they can do is then they can drag the matching, and they can drag them into the answers. I can do ordering. So think of things, putting it in chronological order, things like that. You can have a picture and have them do a short answer or text. And again, think of short answer. I could add what the answer is supposed to be on my answer key, and it will grade it for you. Most of these you can create the answer key for, except for, paragraph where you're going to have them like respond. Obviously, they're writing something, much longer. There's a drop down. So here it says list the mascot for each NFL team. So Baltimore, you got Ravens, Dolphins. So you can kind of go through, and that is a drop down. This one you can see I have a little paragraph. I think this is the drag and drop. So inside of a paragraph, and I know these are not correct, but you can see that I can drag them right in there. And again, they could be graded for you. This is the one that you can see here's a 10,000 word limit, is something that would obviously have to be graded. You're asking them, think of those open-ended questions that they're going to physically, kind of explain something that, can't be graded for them. This one is label image. So you could have a picture. So this one was parts of a microscope. So I can say the eyepiece would go up here. And again, you're going to set the answer key for these, but just kind of giving you an idea of some of these interactive type. I know this is one of Dylan's favorites, so I threw this one in here for him. He's a big water cycle guy. But please click on the area that demonstrates condensation. This one is called highlight image. So I put these pieces here, and you can see as I move my mouse over them, I would be able to click on one. So Dylan, help me out. Where's the condensation?
I don't know. It's too blurry.
We'll go with the top one.
Yeah, it's the top.
So you would be able to click that, and that the student would be able to identify that that's the correct part of the image that is responding to that question. I could also highlight. So a kid has the option to draw, which is really nice. So they have some drawing features, which is pretty cool. Here's some math. Go ahead.
Brian, going back to that drawing one, does this work with, like, I know you've had iPads and Chromebooks, like touchscreen. The kids have touchscreen. Is that touchscreen compatible, or?
Yep, the touchscreen works great. I've never tried it on an iPad, but with a touchscreen Chromebook, it works fine.
Okay, cool.
I'd imagine through the Schoology app, it would probably be the same, but that one I have not tried.
That is awesome.
Yeah, this one's pretty cool too, because it has, I don't know why the box is so small, but I have show your work for the following problem to draw their points. I can fit, and again, I'm using a mouse right here, but I could, I could draw this. They could draw what they want to, and this is what would show up on, the teacher side, which is pretty cool. And this is highlighting a word. So I have highlight the predicate of each sentence. So you can have the students click on a word or multiple words, and that would grade it for you. This is a math one. So as I clicked on it, they would be able to, and what Dylan was referring to in the Pages video, the equation editor, the kids have the option then to, make fractions, do square roots, and they can physically do their math type inside of here to show the different steps, which is really nice. This one I think is basic, but it's really cool. This is a timeline one, so you can set the different years, and then what you can do is, I have an example of dragging different events. So the Declaration of Independence, I have the Boston Tea Party, and I'm just dragging them in random places because I don't know all of the dates. But again, you can put them there, and it's kind of neat that you can kind of lay events out on a timeline. This one is also cool. It's called Chart. You can manipulate the chart. So after asking the question, they'd be able to manipulate, obviously the different numbers and whatever they would end on, that would be what would submitted to the teacher. And then the last part is there's an audio, a video, and a file upload. So think about different ways you can get kids to respond. It has a 10-minute limit. So I have it, for example, translate the following sentence into Spanish and record your response. I could click this and record my response for audio. Same for video. So if I would hit record, so it's to explain my thought process, how to solve x minus 2, x plus 5. So if I hit record, you're going to see here I am, I'm sitting here. I can record a video submission and send that off as my answer, which is pretty neat. And then the last one is file upload. I'm a little disappointed that I can't upload Google Docs and things like that, but that's probably because of the Google assignment app that you learned about in the first 3 hours. But this is PDFs, JPEGs, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, all things like that. So really quickly, that is just wanted to show you what the different question types look like. And before I go showing into how to create them, I just wanted to see if you guys had any questions, wanted to add anything. But the preview piece in my mind is great because as I'm creating and adding questions, I can see exactly what the kids are going to see. And I know that's something that people always ask for.
Yeah, I think the last 10 minutes that you just did is the exact reason why people are going to be excited to get off of Google Forms for multiple reasons. But just the plethora, the amount of diverse questions you can ask and have it graded for you. I know I've worked with teachers that have tried to do the whole labeling pictures, and it's a nightmare to try to do inside of the Google platform. So the amount of varied questions that you can do is incredible.
I totally agree with Dylan, and I think what is very cool, like the drawing ones, I think are going to be a total game changer with the touchscreen Chromebooks. I'm thinking in my head, wow, I've worked with teachers who we've encouraged them to use Pear Deck as a way to collect formative assessment data that way. But then you've got some data in Pear Deck, you've got some data in Google Forms. Ultimately, you have to all put it in PowerSchool, which, having the ability to do this many different types of things in Schoology, have it graded for you, and then ultimately it's, we're going to have that sync with PowerSchool. It's just going to simplify everything for everybody.
Yeah, and that's the one thing I wanted to kind of jump off. I'm glad you said it, Heather. Is when we come back in August, because you obviously are most likely watching this now in June, and if it is August, you're going to be setting up your gradebook shortly, is that the gradebook to be used, once it's set up nicely with PowerSchool, what this will do is you just envision if you have an assessment set up, it will grade it for you, it will push it to your PowerSchool gradebook automatically as soon as the student submits it and takes it. So it's really huge in my experience it's a big time saver that you're not having to input grades, things like that. It will grade it, it will push it, and it will put it in your gradebook for you all in one kind of simple swoop. So go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's going to be great. And I think it's really important when they start with these assessments to start slow. But I think as folks evolve, they are going to find tremendous power in using these assessments and time saving. It's just going to save you time.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is I just want to show a couple how to add a question, because again, every one of these, as you saw, is different and it does it a different way, but I'm going to show you how I did it. So all I would do, and I have these 19 here, so I would just click on multiple choice. You see I had 19, now I'm at 20, and it says question setup. So this is where your question would go. What I want to point out there is you have all these options. I can add a picture. So some of them you saw, I had a picture. You know, I can add a table. I can do all kinds of stuff up here. Heather, you need some oil on that door.
Yeah, I'm really sorry. I'm like trying to find a quiet spot. It's not easy in my house.
So you can see you can add links and some different things. So I just wanted to point that out. So think of multiple choice. This is where my question is. Here's my answers. So let's say I have answer A. I could do answer B, C, D, and so on. But what I want to point out is you can also then put pictures as an answer, which is pretty cool. We'll just do answer C. We'll just call this answer D. So those are my options that the kid would see. So in order for, and I can obviously add more if I wanted to, but in order for this to grade it, just like you would in Google Forms or things like that, is you have to set up that answer key. So right now it says correct answer setup. So let's say my correct answer was B. What I can also do is shuffle the options for the kids, allow multiple responses, meaning they could select multiple answers. And then you could have exact match or partial match. So all of those are going to be dependent on what your type of question is. So let's say if the answer is B, and we're going to shuffle them, that's it, I'm done, it's 100%. But they could also have, I can have another answer key, so it would record another answer if there was more than one. So that's all you would do, is you can add multiple answer keys if you need to. If not, and it's pretty straightforward, which most of your questions probably will be, you can simply just set that up. We're going to keep all these the same. I would hit save, and it would go down to the very bottom. And then again, I could go to preview very quickly, and then I can go to question number 20, and I can see exactly what it would look like from the student's perspective. So let's get to 20. And then there it is. So again, if you put a picture in here and the picture looks too big, too small, didn't come out right, this is the way that you can obviously go back in and see what it would look like. But what I wanted to do is show you some of those different ones that might require dragging, dropping. So this one is ordering. So here was my question. Here were my options for the kids. And then you can see my correct answer setup. I have the ability to move them, obviously, in order. So you're also manipulating it the same way in your answer key, which is really nice. So if I would do the drop down, again, you'll see my question at the top. And then if you notice, and a lot of these, this is why they have different options under each one, and I'm not going to go on every single one, is create a blank type and underscore, and that would pop up as a response. So what I did is anytime I type an underscore, it's going to give me an option for a response. So my response for one, these are going to be their different options. This is a drop down. I would have all of those for 1 through 4 or 5. And then again, when I go back to correct answer setup, all I'm doing then is I'm clicking the drop down and I am selecting the correct answer so that it would grade it for me.
Brian, can you explain how the partial score works? Like if they get half, they get half credit. Is there an algorithm already built in for Schoology with that?
You could see the penalty. You could change that and think of that like, let's say it's a fill in the blank. The partial match would be you're allowing if they didn't put a capital letter. So let's say you're looking for, you know, the capital of Texas, you know, for Austin. If you had your answer key as capital A and they put a lowercase a, it would still accept that. So
okay,
on a small scale, that's kind of what that means.
So what happens if they get 2 out of those 4 right? Will that give them partial score, or is that only going to give them? Is it going to say it's wrong because it's?
Well, you would choose what the penalty is.
Okay.
So again, every one of these is different in the sense that it has individual options. Again, for the exact, but you can provide what the penalty is. If they get 1 of 3, you know, what does that look like? And again, it just depends on the question. And if you And I forgot to mention this before, but if I don't want to go back and preview the entire test, at the top of every one says preview question. And then I can quickly go back in and just to make sure it's right. And if it's oh, I quick made a mistake, I can go back to that edit view, which is really nice. Oh, yeah. One of the other ones I wanted to show is label image and how I did that one. So that one's really easy in terms of setting up an image. So my question is labeled the parts of the microscope. I uploaded an image. And then what I wanted to do is I added a response box. So when I click that, you will see it added a 5th response box. You can put that on top of any, I can move this wherever I want to. So let's say I'm going to put it right here. So this is how my question's set up. So when I scroll down to my possible responses, these are them. And again, I can add as many as I want. And then the correct answer setup, what you do, here, actually, let me add another one. We'll call that a sample answer. So now when I go down to my key, I have to then move sample answer into that slot. So I created it. I put where the students are going to have to push their answers. And now I'm telling Schoology in my answer key what they have to put in those actual response boxes. And again, I could have multiple. I could have duplicate responses. So I can, kind of toggle off and on, what I want that to look like. So if I go back up to preview, I had duplicate responses. Now, if you noticed, even though I put eyepiece here, eyepiece stayed here. If I didn't have duplicate responses, eyepiece would have moved away and it would show that that one was already used. So not necessarily to trick the kids, but you can kind of, think of it like a word bank, that the word doesn't go away necessarily when they kind of use it. So again, this pop-up PD was meant to just kind of give you a broad overview of assessments. We are going to, go much more into detail. I don't want you to think that this is going to be, 35, 40 minutes and that's it. Just to kind of give you a broad overview of different setup, that accessibility for students in terms of the, notepads and changing their font colors and things like that so they can see it better. But just to kind of open your eyes to some of the questions that are, obviously out there. Back on that Schoology, the Google slide, all these things that are underlined. So if I click on types of questioning and I open that link, they do a really nice job that if I click on any of those questions, so if I say I want to do that label image that I was just talking about, they have a whole page dedicated to just labeling the image, how to add the image, how to set up your answer key. And it does that for every single question. So again, we're going to be here. We're going to be going over it and working more with your department and you as an individual. But I just wanted to kind of give you a broad level overview. And hopefully for your assignment for this pop-up PD is kind of get you to start thinking of some of those different things that you can use, as well as mixing question types with an assessment, not necessarily using 20 multiple choice or 20, true or false, is really mixing what you're using to kind of interact and engage kids in the material.
So Brian, I have a question regarding, your previous experience with teachers using assessments, because as you're going into the deep into the weeds with all these different types of questions and how to set them up and partial credit and all that, I'm just thinking these are going to be really involved things to create. So, to what extent have you seen teachers use these for formative versus summative assessments? And have you seen teachers create them collaboratively so they sort of work smarter, not harder?
Yep. They are used formatively. They're used summatively. But I will say the one that you just said last, and that's why I bolded it last on my slide, is the work together, work smarter. Like you said, is that, if you have the same class as another teacher and you want to create an assessment, you guys can do it together and then each use that same assessment. I had a group of 5 teachers in a department that each took the assessments for a different unit and they each did them all. And then they all had the assessments for all 5 units. So it's just a nice way to kind of divide and conquer if that's something that you're interested in, and I would recommend. But the nice thing is that, it's there for you to just quickly dump into your class. And, that's pretty much it. It creates that copy and, just kind of working together to kind of build that. You can do question banks and things like that we didn't even really get into, that you can pull from, but there's a lot there. So something that we'll continue to use in the future and isn't one just this 30, 40 minutes right now.
Right. Yeah. Wow. There's a lot here to assessments.
Yeah. So I don't have anything else. Dylan, do you have anything before we let these people go?
I just wanted to clarify one thing. The question I was asking earlier, I noticed that the microscoped one you had for 4 points. So your penalty score was if you change that to 1, if they get 1 wrong, it'll take 1 point off.
Correct.
Okay, now I understand what that penalty score means.
Yep. And the reason I maybe explained it too broadly is I had a teacher that I used to work with before that all of their questions weren't necessarily 2 points. He might have 1 for 2, 1 for 5, 1 for 7,
Mhm.
1 for 10, 1 for 1. So his penalty score would vary depending on the question.
Okay.
Some he would say it's all or nothing. Some he would give partial credit. Some wouldn't. So it really depends. But yeah, that's essentially kind of what that means.
Okay, yeah, that completely makes sense. No, I agree with what you said and what Heather said. It's definitely a huge component of Schoology and why Schoology is superior, really, to Google Forms and Classroom. It's just the amount of things available and the various questions that you can ask are just incredible for depth of knowledge for students, not just answering multiple choices questions and what we were limited to in Google Forms.
So thank you everybody for watching. I'm looking forward to not only what you kind of think about and put together for the little task or assignment that you're going to have with this Pop PD, but moving forward and working together as individuals, partners, departments, things like that, and kind of seeing what you're coming up with. So thank you guys, and we will talk to you soon.
Yep.
All right.
See you, Brian. Great introduction. Thanks.